Welcome to Phoenix Rising. I'm Coach Kathleen, and let's talk about people pleasing. Another word for people pleasing is codependency. And I recall the first time I kind of heard that term, I thought it really had to do with drug and alcohol. People that were in relationships or in families with people who were, addicted to drugs or alcohol. I didn't understand really what it meant. So basically, when you are raised in a dysfunctional home, there is a dysfunctional dependent person in the home. Okay, so there's this dysfunctional dependent person, and all the rest of the family, the codependents, revolve around this dysfunctional dependent person to make sure that they're okay and they're happy. But what that does to the rest of the family, the kids, the spouse, whoever, it leaves them with very much unmet needs. So as a child in a dysfunctional family, if you do not get your emotional needs met, it really sets you adrift. Because when you're a child, your core foundation of who you are and how you develop your identity is done in the home, in your family of origin. So if you don't have that foundation to build and grow from, then you're kind of left unmoored, just lost and kind of floating, trying to figure out who you are. So if your parent, and it could be an abuse situation, it could be a neglect situation, or it could be that you have a parent who is narcissistic or who is deeply depressed, or again, does have the addiction type of issues, but is unable or unwilling to meet your emotional needs. So you as a child, you don't really have the framework to even put into words and articulate what it feels like when you're not receiving the love and the nurturing that you should, by rights, be receiving from your parents. So you blame yourself. You don't have the wherewithal to emotionally, rationally consider that it might be that one or both of your parents are broken. So children tend to blame themselves. So when they don't feel loved, when they don't feel accepted, when they aren't valued in the home, they don't develop a sense of worth or self-esteem. They are left trying to figure out who they are and try to desperately seek approval, love, acceptance from other people. So that leaves them very open to abuse and manipulation, and that leads to a continuing pattern of destructive relationships. So a child should reasonably expect to get love and nurturing and a sense of self and all the positive things that should come from a parent-child relationship within their home. But when they do not, and what they're left with is trying to make sure this other person is happy, they're trying to seek the approval of this parent who is unwilling to provide that approval. So they're continually trying to make that person happy, to kind of win what it is they think they emotionally need. So that sets them up for just a lifetime of being manipulated and used. And that will carry with them, and not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships, even in the workplace, with spouses, with children, with your parents. It just continues as an ongoing pattern. So how do you break that? How do you get out of that cycle? So that's one of the things that we offer in our Untangling Relationships course. We help people understand what codependency is, kind of how you develop that codependency, and how to walk out of that and develop some new patterns of behavior. But let's talk a little bit more about the dysfunctional home. So the typical abuses that everybody recognizes are, physical and sexual abuse in the home, which are devastating and have lifelong pain and consequences associated with it. So those two are, very easily recognized, not easily recognized, but understood that is trauma. But it can also be a more subtle form of trauma. It could be something like we talked about before. So if you have a narcissistic parent who is completely self-absorbed, they're not capable of really giving or even receiving love. So you may have a parent who has chronic depression, or who is emotionally unavailable. or physically unavailable. Maybe you have a parent that travels a lot and they're never home to really develop a relationship with you. Or when they are home, they're not emotionally present for you. So they make you feel like you are, a waste of their time, or they don't have time for you. It becomes very clear that you are not a priority and that you're even wrong for even wanting that. So the basic needs that a child should be able to safely express, their wants, their desires, what they need. They want to feel safe. They want to feel loved. They want to feel supported and nurtured. All of those things are absolutely normal wants to have for a child. But a child in a dysfunctional home is taught that that is not acceptable. If they do express something that they need, they are, criticized or ridiculed or punished or yelled at, or there's a negative consequence associated with that. And so they learn very quickly not to express how they feel, what they think, what they want. They learn to be reactive to the emotions of other people around them, but not to have their own emotions. It's not safe for them. So it may be a child may say something like, oh, a parent says something or does something, well, that's not fair. Or that, that hurts me. And they're told, oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, stop being a baby. Oh, just go cry in your room because nobody wants to hear it, kind of a thing. So the child learns early on that their emotions don't matter. So the easiest thing for a child to do is just shut that down, to become numb and to try not to feel and not to express those feelings if they do feel. So they learn that pattern of behavior very early on. So they carry that into other relationships. So when they get into these other relationships, typically a codependent person tends to attract or be attracted to a dependent dysfunctional person. And the dysfunctional dependent person tends to attract or be attracted to the codependent. A dysfunctional dependent person is happy to let you do everything for them, to let you, make things easy for them and keep them happy without having to give anything of themselves, which is typically that type of, the dynamic that's in that kind of a relationship. So the codependent is so desperate for love and attention and approval that they put up with a lot of negative, unhealthy behaviors because they're so desperate to just be loved. That is the core, that is just the crux of codependency, is that desperate need to be loved, to be valued, to be seen as worthy. And we will go to great lengths and suffer great abuse in order to try to attain that. It never works. Spoiler alert, it never happens, it never works. But we will just about kill ourselves to continue to do that, to seek that approval. And so the dysfunctional dependent person is very happy when they find a codependent because it keeps them from being responsible and taking accountability for themselves. So it's just this never-ending cycle. The codependent eventually does begin to get angry and resentful, but because they aren't allowed to feel their feelings, they just keep stuffing it down. And that's going to have to come out somehow. So a lot of times it will come out in physical ailments, or it'll come out in, panic attacks or anxiety or migraines, or sometimes there'll be some displaced anger. The person they're really angry with perhaps is an abusive spouse. But they will displace that anger on somebody else or have a disproportionate response and anger to something very small, something that typically wouldn't warrant that level of a response, but they're way up here because they've stuffed it for so long that the true subject of their anger and pain isn't safe for them to express so they express it in inappropriate ways and at inappropriate times. So that's just one of the many, many consequences of stuffing your emotions. So we become numb. And so eventually we lose ourselves. We no longer know what we like, what we want, what our opinions are. We don't know we don't even know how we feel or think or want for anything. We're feeling, thinking, wanting what everybody else wants us to feel and think and want. So it's very easy for codependents to lose themselves and lose their identity because they didn't have much of an identity to start with. Because think of that child. that in the family of origin, they had no foundation, they had no root to understand who they were other than negatives. So they don't feel they're worthy of love. They don't feel like they're worth being valued and respected. So when they get in these bad relationships, they feel like this is their destiny. This is kind of what they deserve. And that is completely false. They don't have a true sense of self and a true sense of identity. And so that's half of the battle. So with codependence, we develop this very early on. It's difficult to identify that until we can get to a place where we can be introspective and be honest with ourselves and figure out, okay, something's wrong. So if you continue a pattern of like broken relationships. So in my case, I had a series of relationships that didn't work, and they were with people who tended to manipulate and abuse and those kinds of things and use me and that type of thing. And so I began to realize that I was a common denominator. And I remember putting this into words. This was probably in my 20s where I said, I think I'm broken, that there's something wrong with me, that I'm attracting these people and I'm attracted to these people. So what is it in me that needs to be fixed so that I will be attracted to healthier individuals and more functional, healthy individuals so that I can have a healthy, functional relationship? Unfortunately, I didn't figure that out very soon, and so it carried into my marriage. So for those who may be in a relationship with an abusive person, it may be an obvious abuse. Like I said, it could be physical, sexual, whatever. But a lot of times it's more subtle, where they start out slowly. Like a narcissist will love bomb you and make you feel like you're the queen of the earth, that you are the only person that exists. They give you their sole attention. It's very intense in the beginning. They just almost overwhelm you and make you feel so loved and so desired, so valued. But that is just the beginning stages of manipulation. And over time, what happens is we've received this huge outpouring of love and admiration that we've never had. Like as codependents, we didn't get this in our lives. So we're desperate for it. So this person gives it to us. Suddenly, our alliance, our allegiance, our loyalty is with this person, and we just crave that from them. But slowly over time, they start withdrawing that. They start criticizing. They start making little comments. They start tearing down. It erodes our self-confidence. Any self-confidence that we did have, it erodes that. It erodes our sense of identity. It erodes everything to the point that we're finally completely under their thumb and under their control. So the goal is control. They want to be able to control us. And so when we are not able to recognize these red flags and set those boundaries, that's when we set ourselves up to coercive control. So it's important that we do understand we need to be able to learn how to recognize those red flags, but also it's important that we listen to others around us. So if you think about it, if you have a relationship with somebody who is healthy and functional and truly does love and care about you, they want what's best for you. And so if they're telling you, listen, this relationship, it's not good for you, we're seeing some red flags here, you need to listen to that. Again, if these are healthy, functional people that are in healthy, functional relationships, they want what's best for you, then you want to hear that, because they're probably seeing the red flags that you as a codependent is not able to see. So these things it doesn't happen overnight. You have to make a conscious decision to begin to examine what it is about you, what in you, what has happened that's got you to this place. So someone once gave me the gift of healing, and I wanted to share that gift of healing because it transformed my life. It changed me. It changed my whole life. It changed the trajectory of all my relationships. Who I was, how I saw others, how I walked through the world is different now. And so it really helped me. And so I wanted to offer this workbook to others that made such an impact on my life. So that's how Phoenix Rising came about. So it is rising from the ashes of our past, because a lot of us felt like we had just burned ourselves to the ground. One, trying to fix and rescue everyone else and making sure everyone else is okay, but to our own detriment until we burned ourselves out. So we're going to rise from the ashes of our past, from those poor choices and bad relationships, and we're going to learn a different way. We're going to learn how to let go and begin to heal ourselves and not be so dependent on other people for our worth, our value, our sense of self, and our identity. So join us as we just take this wonderful adventure to growing and becoming a stronger and better person, a more functional person who can operate with a sense of self and worth and value.